Now, this is Thursday. 2 days ago, Tuesday, the Supreme Court ruled in a ruling that attacks the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment head on. This is what I, in my limited knowledge, have been warning against for years, what people much smarter than I have been warning against, that eventually, if we weren't careful, there would be a Supreme Court who would demolish the wall between church and state. Now, while the ruling on Tuesday may not necessarily have demolished the separation, it has weakened it incredibly. And that was the ruling on Tuesday that state programs, tax money, that provides funds for public school tuition, as just about every state taxation program does, cannot exclude schools that teach religious instruction. So here it is. So this decision by this fascist Supreme Court finally demolishes what the fascist Christians have been trying to demolish for decades. And that is the restriction on using taxpayer money to pay for religious education. So the wall that is supposed to be unbreachable between church and state has just had a sledgehammer taken to it on Tuesday. And the vote was 6-3, the usual 6-3. Now, the issue was a state program in the state of Maine that made taxpayer money available to families who live in remote areas without a public high school. Now, under the state law, the families could use the money for their children's tuition at public or private schools in other communities, but the money could not be used for sectarian schools. And that was defined in Maine as a school that promotes a particular faith or belief system and that teaches material, quote, through the lens of that faith, end quote. Pretty clear, right? So on Tuesday, the way the decision was written, it was the majority opinion was written by John Roberts, Chief Justice. He said that program in Maine, quote, promotes stricter separation of church and state than the federal Constitution requires, end quote. He said, and the way he explained that, he said the tuition program put in place by the state of Maine is not neutral, he said, because, quote, the state pays tuition for certain students at private schools so long as the schools are not religious. That is discrimination against religion, end quote. No, it is not, you insane fucker. What has happened to your brain, John Roberts? It is not discrimination. It is totally neutral. It just says no money from state taxpayers to promote a certain religion. Now, in your right-wing brain, Chief Justice, you might see that as discrimination, but if so, it is the discrimination alluded to and stated fairly clearly for me in the First Amendment. Roberts also noted that the state money does not go directly to schools, but flows, quote, through the independent choices of private benefit recipients, end quote. I don't know what that means because I'm not that familiar with the laws in the state of Maine. But I do understand the overarching decision that the Supreme Court made on Tuesday. Now, a couple of years ago, this is according to Pete Williams at NBC, the Supreme Court correspondent, 2 years ago. In a case from Montana, the Supreme Court ruled that when states make tuition money generally available, they can't exclude schools that are run by religious institutions. that have, in other words, a religious status. But even though the Supreme Court ruled that 2 years ago, it left unresolved the issue of whether it would matter if the schools actually offered religious instruction. In other words, there could have been a school funded by a religious organization as long as it didn't teach religion, religious propaganda, religious bullshit. So the court left it unresolved whether it would matter if the schools actually offered religious instruction. Well, that question has now been answered. The Supreme Court says it doesn't matter. If you want to teach fascist, goddamn evangelical Christianity lies, go ahead. And you can use taxpayer dollars that come from atheists, agnostics, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus. Everybody has to now support this fascist Christian ideology bullshit. The Supreme Court saith. In a separate dissent on Tuesday, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said that this decision leads her to fear that the court's earlier decisions were, quote, leading us to a place where separation of church and state is a constitutional slogan, not a constitutional commitment. And today, she added, the court leads us to a place where separation of church and state becomes a constitutional violation. Whoa. End quote. So what Sotomayor is saying very clearly, that to deny these funds to a school, a high school that teaches religious bullshit, to deny funds to that school is now a violation of the Constitution. I mean, this is fucking upside down world if one ever existed. Look how quickly the fascist Christians are destroying piece by piece every single bit of social progress away from religious bigotry, away from the madness of these crazy religious freaks. Look how it's being dismantled. The rush away from that shit. And Justice Stephen Breyer, writing for himself and Justice Kagan, he cited what he called, quote, an increased risk of religiously based social conflict when government promotes religion in the public school system, end quote. Well, no shit. Which is the whole basis and genesis of the First Amendment, where it concerns separation of church and state. The framers, as hypocritical as they were about certain issues, they had a model. They had a centuries-long model of what happens when church and state are the same. Bloodshed, destruction, war, death, torture, murder, mayhem, pogroms, executions. And they were trying to stay the fuck away from that. No more. And of course, the case, I should say, came to this court, as I mentioned earlier, after two sets of parents in Maine, you fuckers, sued, claiming that the tuition program violated their religious freedom. You son of a bitches who twist language. It didn't violate these four people's religious freedom. What the court rules has violated religious freedom. The freedom from this religious bullshit. The fascist Christians don't give a shit about that. Oh, no. No. Our religion is the religion. I mean, Jesus himself said, no man cometh unto the Father but by me. So when you croak and rot and the worms eat you, if you want a trip to heaven, you got to be a Christian. Our brand of Christian. I mean, these queers that get married and then say they're Christian. No, they're not. This is fucked up, people. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.